Hi, this is Ian Buckley and you are watching MakeUseOf.com. Today we're going to install Android 7.1 onto a Raspberry Pi 3 Model B. The process to do so isn't that difficult, there's a few steps to it, but we'll go through them all. So without further ado, let's jump in. So just before we get started, I want to point out we'll be doing this in Linux. If you're not used to using Linux, that's no problem. You can just make a live USB stick, like I have done today, using any USB pen, or you could use a virtual machine on your Windows or Mac. Whichever way around you decide to do it, I'll put a couple of links in the description to teach you how, in case you've never done it before. But once you have logged into Ubuntu, head to the RTAndroid website, which also will be linked in the description, and head to Downloads and Raspberry Pi 3. Download the most recent build, and this will download an image as a zip. And as soon as you have downloaded it, navigate to your downloads folder and copy the full path name. The reason I'm saying to do this is because the next thing we are going to do is unzip it in the terminal. Now open up a terminal window, you can just press Ctrl-Alt-T to do that. And on the site that we were just on, the instruction tells you to unzip it. However, it tells you to put in your own version and date, which is why I said to copy it, because then you can just copy your version into their code. But the first thing we will need to do is go to the downloads folder where the zip file is, and then unzip it. Once that's done, it should have unzipped the entire folder into the downloads folder for you. And what we need to do now is enter the disk that we're going to use in our Raspberry Pi. So I've got a micro SD card here in a converter that I'm just going to put into a little SD card slot I have here, and it should show up hopefully. There it is. So I'm going to get loads of things here because I've used this before and it is very partitioned, but that's fine. And we're going to use sudo fdisk and list them to list all of our disks. Now this part's quite important. You need to make sure that you choose the right one, because you could very easily accidentally wipe your hard drive here or something horrible like that. So be absolutely sure that you are choosing your micro SD card. I happen to know it is SD because it is partitioned into 4, because I've done this before. And that is where I'm going to install the image onto. So it tells you here how to install it. You can use the code from the site, but of course be sure to change it from, in my case, instead of SDC, it is SDE. And that will start installing everything on the card. Now, do bear in mind that will also wipe the card and partition it. So if there's anything you want on that card, make sure that you've backed it up first or to use a separate micro SD card. But this will install the image on the card, and it can take a little while. Be patient. All being well, as soon as this is done, you will get a message saying you can now take this out and put it in the Pi and boot it up. So, all being well, you should have this message. Installation successful. You can now put your SD card in the Raspberry Pi, which is exactly what I'm going to do, and then boot it up. And here we are. I put the SD card in the Raspberry Pi and it booted up. It took about 2 or 3 minutes, which is a little long for a boot up time, but apparently that's just the first time, and I have found that when I've been restarting it in testing that it has been a little quicker. I have a USB mouse and keyboard plugged in, and they just work natively without having to do anything else. The only real issue that I've come across is that sometimes the mouse will turn into this pixelated ball for seemingly no reason whatsoever, but that isn't really the biggest deal in the world. But before we go any further, we need to add something to this. As you will see if you look in the menu, we have no link to the Google Play Store as yet. And this is because it isn't installed as standard. So there is one further thing that we need to do back over on the Linux machine, but before we go over there, we need to find out our IP address. And it is very important that your Raspberry Pi is on the same network as your computer, because you will be SSHing into it in order to install the Google Play app. So you can find your IP address by heading into the settings and heading down to About Tablet, because this is the tablet build of Android 7.1. And then clicking on Status. And it says IP address unavailable. Of course it says IP address unavailable because I haven't connected to the Wi-Fi. Let me do that just quickly now. So here we are back on the same status screen now that I've connected to the Wi-Fi, and as you can see, your IP address is displayed just here. Note this down, we'll need this in order to install the Google Play Store on the Raspberry Pi, which we'll do over on the Linux machine now. Back over here on the Linux side, we're going to start by just making sure that our system is entirely up to date by typing sudo apt-get update into the terminal. And once that has happened, I don't think mine will need to update because I've just done this. You can also install the Android debugging bridge. Now this is something that will allow us to communicate with our Pi over the network, and you do that by typing sudo apt-get again, install Android tools adb. And I know it's already installed on mine, so it won't do much. It may ask you whether you want to install it or not, just say yes. And finally, we need to install a facility called Unzip for this to work also, which you do exactly the same way, sudo apt-get install Unzip. Now that all that's done, we can connect to our Pi, or our Android, or whatever you want to call it now, using the Android debugging bridge. And you do this by going adb connect, and then your IP address, which in this case is 192.168. Yes, that's correct. And it was already connected because I was doing this just before. And so now we can move on to modifying this gaps script in order to install Google Play onto our Pi. So I have opened this gaps.sh script in a text editor here, and the Open Gaps project, or OpenG Apps project, whatever you want to call it, is designed to allow you to place things on an Android device through scripting. We just need to change a couple of things here. So the ADB address, once again, will be your IP address, which I've got copied over here somewhere. And the architecture is ARM for our Pi, and the package name we're going to go for is Pico. There are various packages involved with the OpenG Apps service, but the Pico one basically just gives you the Google Play Store. Anything after that you decide to install is entirely up to you. It doesn't add all of the other things that you would usually get on an Android device, which is totally fine by me. So now that I've added all of those parts, I'm going to save this gaps file and run it. And the way I'm going to run it is, I'm just going to press clear to get a clear window, is by going /gapps.sh. Now when you run this, it will change your SD card on your Pi while it is still on. You don't need to touch it, you don't need to do anything about it. Now this will take quite a while. It'll actually take longer than it took to flash the SD card in the first place, but when it is finished it will reboot itself, and when it is rebooted we can go back over to the Pi and see what we can get from the Google Play Store and what works. So once again, as you can see, that is done. And it says here, please be patient and give it time to initialize the installed packages. It can take up to 10 minutes for the system to be responsive after a boot. I just thought it was worth mentioning that in case you got this far and stuck the SD card in and thought it wasn't working. Just be patient, it should boot up no problem. So let's try it out. So on restart, you should find in the menu that you have the Google Play Store installed now, and you can sign into that just like you would on any other Android device and start downloading apps. Now I downloaded just a few things to test, and I got much the same idea from everything here. I downloaded Netflix to try out some video stuff. I also checked YouTube, and they both have similar problems. With YouTube, I found that I could not see any images no matter what happened. I could sometimes hear the audio, and sometimes I just have strange graphical bugs and nothing would happen. With Netflix, I've seen some videos and read some things online that people have managed to get it working, albeit for a very short amount of time. For me, I couldn't even sign in for some reason from this device, although that could be a problem with me rather than the build itself. I also tried out Duolingo because I'm learning German, and that seemed to run pretty much fine. The audio worked perfectly fine, and the app ran at a relatively decent speed. And the two games I installed were Laserix and Hoplite, because one of them is quite beautiful and has good graphics, the other one is very light. And predictably, the one with the higher graphics ran quite slowly, and I had great difficulty using the mouse instead of the touchscreen. I should point out at this stage that there isn't really any stable way of using a touchscreen with Android on Pi currently. That's something that people are working on. Hoplite ran perfectly, apart from the fact that it was stuck in portrait mode, and as you can see, this monitor is landscape, so that didn't particularly work all that well either. However, I did manage to get onto the Play Store, I did manage to download all of those things, and if you use Google Music services, if you install the Play Music app, you will be able to listen to your music on the Raspberry Pi through the Google Play Music app. So that is how you install Android 7.1 onto a Raspberry Pi 3 Model B. But the more important question, as far as I'm concerned, is why would you do that? If you are someone who is really into the Android operating system and you work with it, then it may be something that is worth looking into. But currently there's no official support for Android on the Raspberry Pi, and though Google have made a repository to try and port Android over officially to Pi, as far as I know, no work has been done on it yet. Like I said, if you're someone who's into Android development or Android things in general, it's definitely worth a look. But if you're looking for something to play games on, or maybe a media center, I don't see why you would do this when there are other things like Kodi or RetroPie already available for it. But either way, I hope this tutorial was useful for you. Be sure to subscribe here for more weekly tech tips and giveaways. Thanks.